What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we finish up our talks on the way of the Kensei monk as we build one together, and yes, you all have been asking me to make a gun-based monk build since I started talking about monks, and today is the day, so don't worry about it. It's coming. Before we do that, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. This has been one you've been asking for a while, so it definitely deserves a like. And of course, make sure to share this with your friends as well and ring the bell so that you're notified when new videos are uploaded. Most people who watch the channel are not subscribed, so please don't be one of those people. Help us to reach our goal of 5,000 by the end of this year. We can do it, but I need your help. So like I said, I've been getting comments about the gun-based monk since I started talking about the monk on the channel, and honestly, I can see why. Firearms are something that are kind of a forbidden fruit for a lot of people. They aren't necessarily allowed at every single table. Personally, I allow them at my table, but I know that I allow some things that I'm sure you would not have at your table and vice versa. So, and that's fine. That's the beauty of D&D. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But today I've had people ask me about firearms and whether or not a monk really could shine using a firearm. And the answer is absolutely yes. Monks can definitely shine with firearms, and I am excited to show you just how much they can actually shine, because it's actually kind of surprising what they can do when they get a hold of a gun. And so I guess without any further ado, let's jump into today's build. Of course, if you want to pick up a copy of the write-up for this build, it is down in the description for you by joining the channel. For just $2 a month, you can join the channel and get access to all of my build guides and all of my subclass fixes. All of those are found in the lowest tier. You, of course, can splurge and go for a higher tier if you want to. That is very much appreciated. And of course, I want to shout out our silver and above members. Those are going to be right there on the screen. Of course, you do get a weekly shout out for being a silver or above, and gold gives you priority for actually suggesting variety builds that we are going to be doing for the channel very soon. There's going to be a variety build going up very soon for this month. We're going to be doing them once a month where I am not necessarily tied to a specific subclass. And so I think that you guys are going to like those, because then I get to just multi-class all over the place and it feels a lot better rather than being necessarily restricted by the certain rules that I've placed for this series. So make sure to join the channel if you want the write-up for all of this. And so, yeah, let's get back into the build. Starting off at the beginning, we start with our race. And I've been so good for so long about not going custom lineage, about not going variant human, and about going some really, really fun races. And I really came very close to going with a different race for this build. And of course, we talk about those in the honorable mentions at the very end. But for today, I'm going back to my old ways and we're going with custom lineage. Of course, you could do variant human as well. Either way is fine, but we need a couple of feats in order for this to really be as good as it possibly can. And I don't want to put those off, because I'm just going to tell you, with the multi-classing that we're doing in this build, which is somewhat heavy, we actually don't get a lot of feats. And there's a huge dry spell where we don't get any feats at all for like a long time. And so I really want to go ahead and get this stuff out of the way at the beginning, and then we will be able to take ASIs whenever we get a chance afterwards. So of course, for that feat that we get, it's the gunner feat. Absolutely. We're taking the gunner feat because it gives us so many awesome benefits just by taking it. Number one, we of course get a +1 bonus to our dexterity. And so we are going to happily take that. That is going to boost up our stat even more, that we're going to be using for our attack rolls, for our damage rolls, for our initiative, for our armor class, because we're a monk, for all of these things. And so I will absolutely take that. We of course get proficiency with firearms, which is incredibly important, which we technically would have gotten proficiency through the monk subclass, but I would like to be using the firearm earlier than when we get the subclass. And so we need to go ahead and get proficiency now. So that's a thing. We also ignore the loading property, which is incredibly important for a build that is going to be making multiple attacks during a turn, being able to ignore loading is literally everything, because the loading property will absolutely shut you down on something that is like this. And finally, we also do not suffer disadvantage whenever we are within 5 feet of a creature that we are trying to attack. As you know, normally you would have disadvantage on attacks if you are attacking within 5 feet with a ranged weapon. This removes that restriction, which is kind of important, and it's actually very useful, and you may or may not use this quite a bit, just depending on what kind of situation you get put in, whether you like it or not. Next up, we have our stats, and of course, we are doing our modified standard array as always. If you are using a point-buy system, if you're using regular standard array, rolled stats, or some other system, then your stats will likely look different than mine, and that's totally okay. Just adjust them based on what you can use at your table, and just prioritize them in the same order that I am showing you on here. We're going to put our top stat into our dexterity for our 17. We're going to put our 15 into our wisdom, our 13 into our constitution, and then I don't care about the rest. None of the other ones matter. We're not using them, so do whatever you got to do. And then of course, we're going to put our racial bonus and our gunner bonus into dexterity, which gives us a 20, which is great. You may have an 18 depending on your stat array. That's also pretty good. Either way, we're looking pretty good to start out. Then for equipment. Now, equipment is kind of tricky with this one because we're wanting to use a firearm. I fully understand that not every table is going to allow you to start with the weapon that I would want you to be using, and that is a musket. Muskets are expensive and they're also firearms, and so not every DM is going to allow you to start with one. I understand that. If you can start with a pistol, start with a pistol. If that doesn't work, I would probably start with a short bow and eventually get to where you have a musket. I'm trying to get up to that really high, high damage roll to where it will actually work. And so you're wondering, okay, well, why not take a longbow since Kenseis can use it? Well, because I want to be able to make it a monk weapon, and longbows aren't going to be monk weapons until I become an actual Kensei. And so that's the kind of tricky thing. So we want to make sure that we have a useful weapon for now until we can get what we want. So grab a musket if your DM allows it. If not, then try to get a pistol. If not, get a short bow and work your way up as you can. One last thing I want to actually say for proficiencies, I don't normally tell people what skill proficiencies to take, because normally it has to do a lot more with flavor than it does with mechanical benefits. But I'm actually going to go ahead and say take proficiency with insight. You'll understand later, but I just want to say here at Character Creation, take proficiency with insight and you'll thank me later. All right, so now we get to actually start taking some levels now that we've got all that stuff out of the way. And at level 1, we are going to be not a monk. And I'm starting with a different class for a couple of reasons. Now, I will say that I'm taking this for less reasons than what I normally would. And so technically you could start monk here and be just fine. But I'm starting somewhere else because I want a couple of really cool benefits here. We're starting, of course, with fighter, and I know that that's not really anything shocking. Fighter, of course, gives us weapon proficiencies off the bat, which is great. But at the same time, it also gives us constitution saving throws, which are not too bad. That would be great if we were casting spells. We actually are not taking any spells on this build. I know a lot of people will make builds that are the gunk, as people call it, that use magic. I'm actually not going that route at all today. So you technically don't need that. I'm here more so for the archery fighting style. The archery fighting style is going to give us a flat +2 to our ranged weapon attacks, and that benefit alone cannot be understated. It is incredibly useful to be able to fire these weapons and to be able to hit a lot more reliably than not. And so I think it's worth a 1 level divert into fighter in order to be able to do that a lot better, especially with something else that we're going to be taking not too far in the future. We also, of course, get second wind, which is a nice little bonus action heal. It is not going to scale well at all because we are not going to be in fighter for very long. In fact, at level 2, we are leaving fighter and we are not coming back for a very long time. Yes, Action Surge is right there, and Action Surge is an amazing feature, but honestly, I am better off overall by going with Monk for a long time actually, and getting a bunch of these key Kensei features before I can think about doing anything else multi-classing wise. So that's exactly what we're going to do. At level 2, we're going to be a Monk 1, and we're of course going to get martial arts and unarmored defense. The martial arts feature of course is going to allow us to make unarmed strikes with dexterity. It is of course going to allow us to do a lot of really cool things that we normally couldn't do before. We of course are restricted on what certain things are as far as considering them monk weapons. And technically right now a firearm does not fall into that category. But we can still do unarmed strikes. We can still do whatever it is that we want to do. We have some really cool things that we still can do, but it's level 2. So like everybody's kind of restricted in what they can do. It's totally fine. We also get unarmored defense, and actually with our current stats, and even if you have 1 less in dexterity, you're probably still better off just taking unarmored defense over something like scale mail. And so I would just do unarmored defense in this case. It's just going to be better for you just for forever, because then it's obviously going to combo with unarmored movement as well. Yes, there is a place for an armored monk. I just don't think that this is the one to do it. At Monk 2, level 3, we are of course going to get a few features that are really nice. And first we get Ki. So now of course we can spend those on several different features for our bonus action, and we will get more uses later on down the road. We also get our unarmored movement, like what we just said. So our movement speed is going up, which feels really nice. And we get dedicated weapon. This is going to hold us over until next level when we can make it a Kensei weapon. But if you have a musket by this point, hopefully you do, then you can use this as a monk weapon now, as long as that is what you've chosen as your dedicated weapon. And that's definitely what I would choose. It falls in all of the restrictions. It qualifies there, which is great. And so we're good so far. But we will of course make it a Kensei weapon at the next level when we of course grab Monk 3, and we will of course get Path of the Kensei. Now we talked about all of the benefits that we get as a Way of the Kensei monk back in Tuesday's video. In case you missed it, that will be up in the icon above for you to check out right there. And so we get some really meaningful things out of this. Number 1, of course, we are going to be able to make this firearm into a Kensei weapon, which means that we can use some of our really cool features along with it. Of course, we do get agile parry here, and I'm just going to be honest, we're not going to be using this like at all, because we don't have any monk weapons that are melee weapons, unless you are just randomly holding one for some reason, if you're borrowing it from a friend, I guess. But usually we're not going to be using this. Instead, we are going to be for now using Kensei shot. We won't be using this long actually, because we have something else we're going to do with our bonus action. But for now, it's a free D4. And you know, if you're out of key points or just don't want to spend key on the other thing that we're trying to do, then this is fine. But overall, we're not going to use this every turn. It's more of a backup plan. We also get deflect missiles, which is completely a trap. I don't think that it's the best feature in the world. It's definitely not worth a key to throw it back. We also get key fueled attack at this level, and normally this is something that I skip over. However, this actually is incredibly important. Well, it will be here very shortly. This allows us to actually make a weaponized bonus action with an unarmed strike or a monk weapon on our bonus action if we spent key as part of our action. Now, obviously, we're using a firearm at this point. Hopefully you're using a musket at this point. And so with that, that's a pretty good chunk of damage that you can deal on your bonus action. And this is only going to stack once we get extra attack here just in a couple of levels. So we've got to figure out a way to spend key on our action, as little key as possible, while still, you know, getting the mileage out of it. And that way we can actually make that bonus action attack that is way better than just that D4 that we got at this level, as well as part of being a Kensei. So we will gain a couple of uses of this as we go forward, but that's definitely something to look at that I normally just kind of am like, whatever. Here it's actually worth thinking about. At Monk 4, we of course get our first ASI or feat. And I mean, come on. we all know what's coming. It's sharpshooter. We've got to take sharpshooter. You take the -5 bonus to hit, and then you get +10 to damage, among other things. You get some really cool benefits on top of that, but that's the main reason we're here. And honestly, the way that the math works out on this, you should probably just have this on all the time. Whether you have an 18 or a 19 in your decks, you should probably have this on pretty much all the time, especially at this level. And you're going to do a ton of damage, and it's going to feel really, really nice. Again, we're getting extra attacks as long as we have spent key on our action. We don't have a great reliable way at the moment, but we're going to get it very, very soon, so don't worry about it. But yeah, this is all going to stack really, really well. We also get slow fall, which is also pretty good, and quicken healing, which is pretty trash. Monk 5. All right, we are level 6, Monk 5, and this is where we kind of bring it all together, at least in my opinion. This is kind of where the base is complete. And honestly, that's not too bad for this kind of a build. Normally something like this takes a lot longer to get off the ground, but honestly, once we get our Monk 5 and Monk 6 together, honestly, that's fine. And I think we've really got a nice cohesive kit, which is pretty cool. So at Monk 5, though, we of course get our extra attack, which is amazing. We of course can now make 2 attacks as part of our action. We're ignoring the loading property, so we can just keep on firing, which is great. Of course, we can't hold like a shield or anything because we have to have a free hand in order to load it, but we can still ignore that property. And then of course, we also get Stunning Strike. Now, keep in mind, Stunning Strike does not work with ranged weapons, and that's a little unfortunate. I do wish that you could, but it also doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and so I understand why. But I still wish that we could Stunning Strike at a distance. Man, that would be amazing and probably incredibly busted as well, but it is what it is. We also get Focused Aim here, and again, this is normally a feature that I ignore when I'm talking about my Monk builds, but it's actually pretty good. We actually can use this to spend key if we have missed out on an attack. So if we miss the attack by, let's say, 1 or 2, we can actually blow 1 key and cause that to hit. It gives us a +2 to hit. Honestly, I would spend up to 2 key points on this because this is going to give us that bonus action attack that we have been looking for. This is a way to spend key. Now, if your dice roll hot all the time, you may never use this, but there are going to be plenty of times where you get right there and blowing 1 key in order to make it hit is worth your time. That is going to be awesome, and that's going to automatically trigger that bonus action attack, which is huge. Making 3 attacks in 1 turn with this musket is absolutely devastating. With sharpshooter all going on at the same time, it's really, really potent, and I really, really like all of this coming together. But at Monk 6, though, is where we really have gotten everything we really want. And it's level 7, which isn't terrible, honestly, for something to all be working together. And for a Monk build, this is actually incredibly strong. This is dealing a lot of damage for a Monk, which I don't get to say very often, but that's cool. So with this, of course, we get our key empowered strikes, which are great. Of course, we have magic punches now, but we also have magic gun damage, which is also good. But most importantly, we have depth strike. This is the big one. This means that we can spend a key point to deal 1d6, because that's our current martial arts die, of extra damage on our attack once per turn. We don't need to do this more than once per turn because we just needed to spend a key in order to be able to get that bonus action attack. So if we hit, then we just deal extra damage. If we miss by a little bit, then we blow key in order to hit, and then we still get that bonus action attack. So either way, this is incredibly reliable, and that alone is why the Kensei is the best, in my opinion, way to build a firearm-based monk in D&D. It's really, really nice being able to have all of that working together, and honestly, the optional Tasha's features just do wonders for a gun-based monk in the modern day of playing D&D. So it's really, really cool. So now that we have all of that taken care of, we've really gotten our base out of the way. We're really open to whatever we want to do. Now, of course, you could, at this point, grab Fighter 2. And that makes a ton of sense to go ahead and grab Action Surge in order to be able to burst that much harder, to be able to make 5 attacks during a turn if you wanted to. And eventually we are going to pick that up. So don't worry, we will do that. But I do think that it's actually worth considering doing something different. You could, of course, continue in Monk. Evasion is right there, and that's another key point as well. Totally makes sense. There are other options that we're going to talk about in the honorable mentions as well, and I almost went with a Ranger, but I'll talk about why I didn't do that in the honorable mentions. Instead, we went with the Rogue, and the Rogue is actually a really fun bring here. Again, I wanted to go non-magical for this just because I feel like it's more monk-ish. I guess that's a word. I wanted it to be more monk-ish, and this allows you to not necessarily have to rely on magic in order for you to deal a decent amount of damage. And it gives us a really interesting interaction that I really wanted to experiment with. And I haven't really seen anybody else doing this online. And so I wanted to make sure that I had my own unique spin on this build. So we're going to take Monk 1, and at Monk 1, we get Expertise. Take Expertise in Insight. We talked about Insight way back at the beginning. Take Expertise. Probably all of you are now seeing where this is going, but if you don't, that's okay. Hang tight. You'll know in just a second. But make sure that you take Expertise in that Insight that you took Proficiency with at the beginning. We also get Sneak Attack, of course, at 1d6. So we're going to be dealing 1d6 extra damage per turn as long as we meet the certain requirements that Sneak Attack, of course, asks, which technically really aren't that hard. Sneak Attack should be happening quite a bit as long as you're playing by the rules correctly. And so, yeah, Sneak Attack's going to happen pretty often, just it's only once per turn, but it's all good. That's an extra 2d6 damage. 1 for Sneak Attack, and then 1 for our Deft Attack. So that's actually pretty cool too. With that, we also get Thieves' Cant, and so we can now speak the secret language of thieves, which is a very interesting way to think about this. Why is your monk now a rogue? What made you consider doing this? Interesting little story thing to think about. At Rogue 2, we're going to get Cunning Action, and this gives us a slew of awesome things that we can do on our bonus action, which allows us to save our key for other things. So instead of having to do the dashes and the disengages, which we couldn't hide before, but dashing and disengaging, we no longer have to spend key on. It's now free. That's really cool. That leaves us open to be able to Stunning Strike, to be able to deal extra damage, to be able to actually add more to bonus to our hits, those kinds of things. And so all of that is just a better use of our key. And I just think that works out a lot better for us in the long run. Finally, Rogue 3. Rogue 3, we get our subclass, and I went through several options here. And of course, we'll continue to talk about these in the honorable mentions, but I ended up going with the Inquisitive Rogue. Now, this is one of my favorite rogues, and this has only happened recently. My absolute favorite is the Soul Knife personally, but this one is kind of creeping up there. And it's honestly really because of the Insightful Fighting feature. Now, Ear for Deceit and Eye for Detail are not bad. They're both technically ribbon features, but they actually are really good in social situations as well. And so they're not bad by any means. But Insightful Fighting gives us a very reliable way to get Sneak Attack if our friends are not cooperating with us. And let's be real, it's D&D. Nobody cooperates with anybody, and there's no such thing as having strategies. It's a one-man army, and so that's what I assume when I'm making these builds. And so having the Insightful Fighting allows us to make an insight check, which is based on our wisdom, which is pretty good because we are a monk, and we go against their deception. So we're trying to figure out what they're going to do next. They're trying to kind of feint us and trick us in what we're doing. As long as we get better than them, then we actually can get Sneak Attack on them for a while without actually having to meet some of the other requirements that we normally would for Sneak Attack, which is pretty awesome actually. And this is a really nice way to actually spend your bonus action if you don't have a way to spend key that turn, or if you didn't want to, or if it's right before combat starts, if you can get this off, that's also something that could be really cool. Okay, so now we've passed level 10, we're in double digits, we're at level 11. We really need to get back to Monk. And so we're probably just going to take a lot of levels in Monk just to get more and more key points. Before we do that, though, I want to take Fighter 2. At Fighter 2, we get Action Surge, and so, yeah, I could have definitely taken this before the Rogue levels, and that would have made a lot of sense, but to be honest, I just think that it's better that I just go ahead and grab this later to go ahead and get Insightful Fighting. That way I'm always getting that extra damage every turn, and so that's extra damage on top of just all of the other things that we're doing, and it just makes sneak attack a lot easier, and there's just less that you have to keep track of as well. So I think that's pretty cool. Then now we're level 12, we're going to take Monk the rest of the way. At Monk 7, we're going to get Evasion, which is fantastic, of course helping us out with our dexterity saving throws, which we did not have proficiency in because we started in Fighter, so that is going to help out a lot there. We also get Stillness of Mind, which is whatever. We also then get another ASI or feat. This is what I was talking about how we have had a big drought in ASIs and feats. Technically, we could have taken Rogue 4 if we wanted to, but I don't know. I just think it's better that we just go ahead and do it this way. I'm just going to take a +1 Wisdom, +1 Constitution, just to round both of those out at even numbers, because those are bothering me, and I really like the even numbers. At Monk 9, we get Unarmored Movement Improvement, so now we can run on liquids and up vertical surfaces, which is pretty awesome. We get Purity of Body at Monk 10, which is fine. Like I've said, it's really only useful in very specific situations that you probably aren't going to be running into a ton of at this level, but it is what it is. We then get Sharpen the Blade at Monk 11, which of course allows us to make our weapon into a +1, +2, or +3 weapon at the cost of key. If you want to do this, you can. You probably have a magic firearm at this point, I would imagine, or some other magic thing that you're doing. And so you may or may not use this, but if you don't, then this is a great way to go. It's there for you if you want to do that. Then we get one more ASI or feat at Monk 12. Honestly, this is just kind of whatever you want. I would go with a +2 to Constitution, a +2 to Wisdom, or the Tough feat. Any of those are fine. I think the best option is probably +2 to Wisdom. That helps your AC, and it also helps out your Insightful Fighting. Constitution, of course, helps out with your Constitution saving throws, which aren't terribly important, just against spells and that kind of thing. But then the Tough feat helps you out with, of course, your HP, which is a big deal. But at the same time, we're a ranged character, so hopefully we're not getting hit nearly as much as we normally would be. So either way, I think you're probably best off boosting Wisdom, but that's just me. Then next we get Tongue of the Sun and Moon at Monk 13. I don't really care about this feature. It's kind of trash, to be honest with you, but it is what it is. Then we get Diamond Soul at Monk 14, one of the best monk features out there. Proficiency in all saving throws. Huge feature, absolutely huge. Love this. And of course, another key point on top of all that. For level 20, it's honestly whatever you want to do, because taking one more level in any of the 3 classes that we've looked at so far have really good benefits. For Fighter, we would get a subclass. For Rogue, we would get an ASI. And for Monk, we would get another key point. I'm going to go with one more key point and grab Timeless Body here. Timeless Body is not great, and so for the feature, it's not all that amazing. You probably would get more by going with Fighter, to be honest, and you could either grab Battlemaster or Rune Knight. Again, we'll go into this a little bit more in the honorable mentions, but either of those would be great here, or you could grab another ASI or feat from Rogue 4, and you could probably bump your stats up one more time, and just kind of do whatever you want with that. So that is our build for today. Let me know what you think down below. Of course, the full build guide is of course there by joining the channel as well, but let's talk about the honorable mentions. I have a few here, and so as far as other racial options, I had 2. Number 1 is the Bugbear. The Bugbear is kind of the quintessential type when it comes to this kind of a build, just because of the extra damage that you get off of this. The stealth proficiency is also really nice, going into like the rogue-ish type of flavor. So that also is really cool. But either way, being able to do the really cool things on the first turn that you can do with the Bugbear is really awesome. And so it's never a bad option. Then we also have the GIF /GIF, whichever one you want to pronounce it, would give you a lot of the firearm proficiencies, and it gives you basically part of gunner and part of sharpshooter. But in the same vein, I really need all the parts of both gunner and sharpshooter in order to get the full benefit out of it. Because if I don't have gunner, I miss out on that +1 bonus to dexterity, which is kind of rough. And if I don't have sharpshooter, then I don't have the -5 +10. So I really still need both, but this gives you a kind of in-between option if you wanted to go with that. For feat options, there are only a couple. Piercer is an alternative to gunner. It doesn't give you all the gunner stuff that you need really, but Piercer lets you basically deal a little bit of extra damage. When you crit, it allows you to have a little bit more flexibility in dealing a little bit more damage consistently with your piercing weapons. And so that is nice. It also does give you a +1 bonus. So that's another half feat to consider. And then there's the poisoner feat. Again, this is not normally that good of a feat just because the damage isn't great and the constitution saving throw for the poison is actually incredibly low. This definitely needs a huge improvement, but it's still an option that you can kind of dip your bullets in and fire that way. I don't know. It's an option if you wanted to do something flavorful like that. For other classes that we could go into, of course, the Battlemaster or the Rune Knight Fighter are both really good. The Battlemaster, of course, has all of the amazing maneuvers that you could use, and there are some really fun ones that would really combo really well with basically anything. I mean, they're all fantastic. And then, of course, Rune Knight, you deal a little bit of extra damage. You'd be able to grow. You'd be able to have the runes that do some really cool stuff. There's a lot of really cool things that you can do by doing that. I mentioned the Ranger in there, and so there are a couple of options that I would consider with it. Normally, I just say Gloomstalker and that's it. But with something like this is more of a sustained type of damage dealer rather than a burst type of damage dealer. And so with that Gloomstalker, while that's nice for a burst type of thing, it actually doesn't offer us a whole lot when it comes to sustain. And so if you wanted to go with more sustain, I would actually recommend going with the Hunter. The Hunter actually allows us to deal a lot more sustained damage. It's less on that front end, but it's more when you take over a combat that looks at, 4 or 5 rounds, depending on how long your combats typically are. So I would also consider that route as well. Not something I normally consider. Finally, the Rogue. I would consider the Assassin. The only reason that I would consider the Assassin is because you have such a long range. Otherwise, the Assassin Rogue is kind of rough to get surprised with. But with this, of course, if you're firing from really far away and the enemy has had no chance to know you're there, then you might get surprise off with that. But otherwise, this is going to be kind of difficult to get off. And so this isn't always the best subclass to take. The Phantom Rogue is nice because you can kind of spread around your damage, although it's not going to be that great because we're not taking that many levels in Rogue. And finally, the Scout, which basically gives you a free disengage when somebody gets up in your business. And that could be pretty nice too. I mean, our AC is not bad, but we also definitely aren't necessarily wanting everybody to be up on our business because we're holding a gun. And while we can fire the gun from 5 feet away and be fine, we may need to position somewhere else, and that would give us a free get out of jail free card. So let me know again what you think down below. I would love to read all of your comments on this build. Next week, we continue on as we talk about the Way of the Long Death Monk, and I am incredibly excited to talk about that very interesting way that they have created the monk. Until then, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.